this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe, leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care friends and family. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I am your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so happy that you've made space to be here with us today. Now, before we get into today's episode, do me a quick favor. If you're feeling the vibe, go ahead and show us some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need you to share this out with someone who may need a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite you to check out our digital home at the selfcareclub.org, where you will find everything from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported and that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today I encourage you to give yourself permission to pause, to reflect, and to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly for you. And remember, if anything in this episode hits home, I want you to go ahead and drop a green heart in the chat. That is our community's way of saying, I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Thank you guys for being here this morning. Mars on YouTube said this view is way better. I'm trying to tell you, if anybody is having any technical issues, if you're having a hard time hearing me or seeing me, we do invite you to head over on YouTube to watch. Same name is here. You can find the link in my bio. TikTok is not a diss. We love you, but the show has to go on. So let's just go ahead and get into it, guys. And welcome everyone in here. Izaldin, I think I'm saying your name right. Peace be unto you as well. And thank you for the well wishes. I appreciate that, as well as the gifts. So before we tune in, or I guess get started in today's conversation, I want to just kind of slow things down for a moment, not in a rushed way, not in a let me multitask kind of way. See, there y'all are. I see y'all coming in here. But like in a real way. Okay. Like, let's just kind of slow it down a little bit in a real way. I want you guys to take a moment to check in with yourself. Not your responsibilities, not your roles, not the people pulling on you. What's up, Kojo? Right? But I want you to check in on you. I want to ask you guys, how's your spirit really doing today? How's your spirit? And as some of you are kind of sitting with that question, because again, it's kind of foreign for some of us to answer that. We're like, I don't really know how my spirit is today. So as you sit with it, I want you to also notice your body, right? I want you to notice your breath. I want you to pay attention to your shoulders, your chest, because a lot of us are moving through life overstimulated, overextended, emotionally exhausted, and we're calling it normal, right? We're functioning, but not always at peace. But we're showing up, but oftentimes we're showing up disconnected from ourselves. And so today's conversation invites us to look at that gently, right? And so this morning I came across a scripture or a quote that came from a scripture. And the phrase was, bad company corrupts good character. I'm going to say that again. Bad company corrupts good character. And so for those of you who don't know, that comes from 1 Corinthians 15:33. And, whether you're deep into your faith walk right now, still figuring it out, or just simply open to the wisdom that meets you where you are, I think that this truth shows up in real life. Because this isn't about judging people or labeling yourself as bad. It's about proximity. It's about what happens when you stay connected to environments that require your nervous system to stay on high alert. It's about how repeated exposure to chaos and dismissiveness or misalignment can slowly wear down even the most loving, grounded parts of you. And so over time, you don't just feel tired, right? You start questioning yourself. You minimize your needs. You tolerate what you once wouldn't. And it's not because you're weak. It's because your system has adapted to surviving. And sometimes God doesn't ask us to fight. Sometimes he asks us to move. Right? Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with discernment. Because obedience isn't always loud. Sometimes obedience simply looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like changing your proximity. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace, even when it costs you familiarity. And so this episode isn't about cutting people off impulsively. It's about self-love, right? And what better time to talk about self-love than February, right? The month of love, right? And when I say self-love, I'm talking about the kind that listens to your spirit and your body. The kind that says, my peace costs too much to keep discounting it for people. So before we go any further, I just want to take this opportunity to breathe with you. Everybody, deep inhale. And exhale. One more time, in through your nose. And exhale. In this moment, I want you to give yourself permission to listen without judgment. And, again, just listen to whatever comes up. Let's sit with the truth long enough for it to heal us, not harden us, right? I want to start things off by talking about when your body knows before you do, right? We're always talking about how the body keeps score. So I want to start here because this is usually where I think awareness begins. Not with a big argument, not with dramatic fallout, not with something you can easily explain, but with a feeling, right? It all starts with a feeling. Have you ever left a room, a conversation, or a simple interaction and nothing technically went wrong, but you felt off? Welcome in, lovely Patricia. Like you just felt off. Your shoulders got tight. Your chest felt heavy. Your energy dipped. And it's like you couldn't quite put a finger on it, but you knew that something shifted. Something changed. That's not you being dramatic. That's information, right? See, our bodies are always collecting data. And our body collects the data long before our mind catches up. And I think that a lot of us, especially those of us who grew up, having to be strong or emotionally aware or the safe one, we were taught to override that information. We learned to talk ourselves out of our intuition, to say things like, it really wasn't that bad, or they didn't mean it like that. Some of us have even convinced ourselves that we're just probably overthinking. But I just want to offer you a reframe. What if you're not overthinking? What if your nervous system is responding to something that your spirit already recognizes? Because safety isn't just physical. Safety is emotional. Safety is energetic. Safety is spiritual. And when you spend time in spaces where you feel unseen or talked over, dismissed, or subtly disrespected, your body stays on high alert. You might notice it show up as fatigue after certain conversations, or irritability that you just simply can't explain. Maybe it shows up for you as a brain fog or a short fuse, or maybe even it's just that feeling of needing to recover after being around certain people. Let me see some green hearts if anyone resonates with that. You just feel off, right? And it's not random. That's your nervous system saying, I don't feel safe here. And here's the part that I think we don't talk about enough. Okay? You don't need a dramatic reason to step back. You don't need a villain in the story. Thank you, Danielle. I see you. Right? Sometimes the reason is simply that your healing has made you more sensitive. Not weaker, but just more sensitive to what drains you. And sensitivity isn't fragility. It's discernment. It's your body and your spirit working together to protect you. So if you've been feeling tired or disconnected or maybe even on edge lately, it might not be because you're doing something wrong. It might be because you've outgrown a space that once felt familiar. And awareness is the first act of self-love, right? Not fixing, not explaining, not confronting, just noticing. Just telling yourself the quiet truth. So I think that it's important that we redefine bad company without villainizing people. I think that we grew up, with the mentality of watching the company that you keep, or, birds of a feather flock together. So they try to tell you don't hang around bad people, or that person is bad company. But again, I think that when we hear the phrase bad company, most of us immediately picture the extremes, right? The toxic, the abusive, the loud, the obvious. But real life usually isn't that clear cut, right? Most of the people who drain us aren't intentionally harmful. I mean, think about it. Most of the times they're familiar. They're loved. They're people that we share our history with. Elevated Awakenings, Lady Blue. Welcome over to the YouTube. And again, I think that that's what makes this conversation so tender, right? Bad company doesn't always mean bad people. Sometimes it simply means misaligned people. People who may be good-hearted, but not good for where you are now. And that distinction matters. And so when you think about misalignment, it can look like being around people who normalize chaos when you're craving peace. It could mean conversations that always lean negative or heavy. Welcome in, Kale. It can look like jokes that minimize your growth or healing. Boundaries being treated like an attitude. Or your joy being met with silence instead of celebration. And so in that aspect, nothing explosive happens, but something subtle does. Rose, welcome in. I think most people are trickling over to YouTube because there's some technical issues on TikTok, FYI. But yeah, so a lot of times nothing big has to happen. There doesn't have to be an explosion. But subtly, you start editing yourself. You stop sharing good news. You lower your expectations and you start bracing yourself before the interactions happen. And that's not connection, right? That's accommodation. And over time, accommodation costs you, right? It costs you so much if you really think about it. And another layer that we don't talk about enough is how healing changes your tolerance. What you once ignored to survive, you now notice because you're safe enough to feel it. That doesn't mean you've become too much. It means your awareness has expanded. And sometimes people who benefited from your lack of boundaries struggle with that when you start honoring yourself, right? And it's not because you're wrong. It's because the dynamic has shifted and they don't like it, right? They can't manipulate you anymore. And I think that's the area where the guilt starts to creep in. Because you start asking yourself, am I being judgmental? Am I abandoning people? Am I wrong for wanting something different? But I want to say this gently and clearly. Outgrowing a space does not mean you think you're better than the people in it. It simply means that you're listening to what you need now. And you're listening to what needs change. Season by season, right? So healing doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you honest. And honesty can feel uncomfortable in relationships that are built on you staying quiet. So if you've been noticing that certain spaces no longer feel nourishing, if they once did, but now it just doesn't, that doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. And consciousness is a form of self-love. So again, we have to redefine bad company without villainizing people. Again, that phrase bad company, it's not always toxic people or abusive situations or clear red flags. Oftentimes they're familiar. The ones we've grown up with, right? The ones that we've grown up with, the people that we've laughed with, the people who know our stories. That's why it's uncomfortable. Okay? And so, I want to talk about how our character gets corrupted quietly. I think most of us imagine character being compromised in these big dramatic ways. Like, I think that we live in a society where we're like, we want to see it big. Everything has to be big, right? So we think of a breaking point or a blow up or maybe even just a moment where everything falls apart, right? And we want to see it on the big screen. But in real life, character usually doesn't collapse. It just simply erodes, right? Slowly and quietly, almost politely. It happens in the small moments that we don't name, right? It starts when you silence yourself to keep the peace. I'm going to just be quiet and I ain't going to say nothing because I don't want to start none. Don't start none, won't be none, right? When you laugh at something that actually hurt, somebody makes a joke or a jab at you and you're like, ha ha ha, I know, right? Mm-mm. When you say yes, even though your body is screaming no. Or when you explain your boundaries so many times that they start to sound optional. Like all of a sudden your no's are negotiable. And so none of these moments feel catastrophic. They feel manageable. But over time, they add up. And what they slowly corrupt isn't your morals, it's your self-trust. Right? You stop checking in with yourself. You second guess your intuition. You ignore the signals that you once honored. And eventually, you start to feel disconnected from who you really are. And I think here's an important part that most people don't understand. This isn't because you lack strength. It's because you're adapting, right? Human beings are wired to belong. So when staying connected requires you to bend, you bend, right? When it requires you to minimize, you minimize. Not because you're weak, but because your system is trying to survive attachment. Over time, though, survival strategies start to feel like their personality traits. You start saying, I'm just easygoing, right? I don't like confrontation, or I don't need too much. But underneath that language is often a quieter truth, which is that you actually learn that being small kept you connected, kept you tied to them. What's up, Tisha? Elevated awakenings to you. Right? And that's where the corruption actually happens. Not when you become bad, right? But when you slowly start to betray yourself. You begin tolerating what you once wouldn't. You lowered your standards. You normalize emotional discomfort. And the scariest part is it feels familiar, right? It feels familiar. But your spirit knows the difference, even though you call it normal, right? That's why even when nothing is wrong, something feels off. That's why peace feels harder to access. That's why joy feels muted. Welcome in, Secret Psychic. And so here's where that reframe, helps to bring us relief, right? Understanding that, awareness is not failure. Noticing the erosion doesn't mean that you've waited too long. It means that you're waking up, right? I think that healing often begins the moment you realize I've been compromising myself to stay connected. And that realization isn't something to be ashamed of. I believe that it is something to honor. And I think that it is something to really cherish and value, because character isn't just about how you treat others. It's also about how faithfully you treat yourself. And reclaiming that faithfulness is restoration, right? And so we have to think, loyalty or self-betrayal. We have to learn the difference between these two things. And so I'll start with talking about loyalty, right? Because for many of us, loyalty was taught to us early, deeply, and without limits, right? Be loyal to your family. Be loyal to your friends. Be loyal to the people who were there when you had nothing. Be loyal no matter what, right? That's what we were taught, especially for Black women, right? Loyalty has often been framed as a virtue tied to our survival. As Black women, we were taught to hold things together, to stay true, to endure, tough it out, be strong even when it hurts. But nobody actually taught us how to recognize when loyalty quietly turns to self-betrayal. See, loyalty without boundaries is not love. It is self-abandonment. And self-abandonment wears a lot of disguises. Sometimes it looks like staying silent when something crosses your values because you don't want to cause problems. You don't want to be labeled that angry Black woman. Sometimes it looks like making excuses for your behavior, making excuses for behavior that you never would tolerate from a stranger. Sometimes it looks like overgiving to people who are consistently under showing up. Sometimes it looks like carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours. And we call all of that loyalty. But let's be honest. If loyalty requires you to shrink, suffer, or to disappear, who is it actually serving? Who is it actually serving? Secret Psychic says, what do you call it when you stop speaking up because you know it's just a waste of breath? Protecting your peace. And I think that it's important that it's bigger than just when you stop speaking out on something, because it's like beating a dead horse, or, it's what you do after that, right? Do you sit and do you tolerate the same behavior? Do you sit and still shrink in that space? Or do you let them and then you go do something else, right? So there's nothing wrong with deciding to stop having conversations with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. If you recognize that you're having the same old conversation again and again with someone, and you see that they are just committed to misunderstanding you, there's no point. I'm not in the business of rationalizing with irrational people. You can be right and I can be right. Right? We can just agree to disagree. But the key is what you do next. So as long as you don't just stay stuck in that stagnant situation, as long as that there is growth happening, then I think that it is a very healthy boundary to set. Yeah, I'm not in the business of rationalizing with irrational people. I don't do it. But yeah, good question. And so I want to look at a few real life examples of loyalty, right? When we think of in friendships, loyalty sounds like answering the phone every time, even when you're exhausted. It looks like being the emotional dumping ground. It looks like always being understanding while your needs are minimized. And when you finally say, I don't have the capacity right now, you're met with guilt instead of care. That's not loyalty. That's conditioning. That's not enough. Let's talk about it in family dynamics, because sometimes it be your own damn people, y'all. So when we look at loyalty in family dynamics, loyalty sounds like that's just how they are. It looks like tolerating disrespect because they still family. It looks like keeping the peace at the cost of your mental health. And here's, when you start setting boundaries, right? Also going back to what you said, Secret Psychic, when you start setting boundaries, they're going to label you as distant, ungrateful. They're going to tell you changed, you acting brand new. But the thing is, what most people call changed or switching up is simply just healed, right? I'm healing. And, it doesn't stop with friends and family, right? Think about in work or ministry spaces. Loyalty looks like overworking without recognition. It looks like saying yes to everything because you don't want to be a disappointment. It looks like spiritualizing burnout and calling it service. But the thing is, God never asked you to sacrifice your well-being to prove your devotion. Service that destroys you is not holy. And I think that the hardest part to accept is that some relationships only function when you betray yourself. They survive on your silence, your overfunctioning, your willingness to carry more than you share. So when you stop doing all of that, that relationship starts to feel a little unstable. Not because you're wrong, but because the imbalance is finally exposed. Real loyalty doesn't demand self-erasure. Healthy loyalty is mutual. It honors your boundaries. It respects your no's. It adjusts when you grow. And so if a relationship can't survive you being whole and healed and healthy, then that relationship was never about connection. It was solely about access. So choosing yourself in those moments isn't betrayal. It's integrity. It's you saying, I refuse to abandon myself to keep this relationship intact. And that decision, as painful as it can be, is one of the deepest acts of self-love there is. Because loyalty to yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. I also want to talk about boundaries as protection, not punishment. Because people love to give boundaries a bad rap, right? Let's clear up any misunderstandings. Boundaries are not about punishment, right? They're about control. They're not about pushing people away. It is simply you controlling what you allow. It's not about being in control of others' actions, or it's not about being in control of the outcome. It is simply about controlling the things that you allow in your space. Boundaries are about protection. They are the way that you care for your energy, your time, and your emotional capacity, and your peace, ultimately, right? And I think that a lot of us struggle with boundaries because we were taught that love meant access. That if someone loves you, or if you love them, they should be able to reach you anytime, demand anything from you. And, it expects your compliance. But healthy love doesn't demand unlimited access. Healthy love respects your limits. A boundary is simply you saying, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. This is what I need to feel safe and whole. Boundaries don't have to be dramatic. In fact, most of them are quiet, if you think about it. Just practical, everyday, right? I'll try to make this real. Boundaries look like not answering the phone just because it rang. Boundaries look like taking time to respond instead of reacting immediately. Boundaries look like declining invitations without over-explaining. Ending conversations that turn disrespectful. Or my favorite one, leaving spaces that feel heavy without making a scene. I don't need to make a dramatic exit. The moment that I realize that my presence is no longer a gift, I am not present. Let me say that again. The moment I realize that my presence, that me just being here in this space is no longer a gift, I am no longer present. Exactly. Peace out. Because some boundaries are spoken, but sometimes they're behavioral. Respectfully or disrespectfully, right, Harold? Because sometimes my exit, I meant what I said. I said what I said. And I said it with authority because I'm finally the authority on me. Mic drop. Gotta go. So again, some boundaries are spoken. Sometimes they're behavioral, right? You don't always have to announce them. You just simply enforce them by changing how you show up, right? And not everybody's going to like it, but it's not for everybody. It's for you. So boundaries often feel uncomfortable at first. Again, not because they're wrong. It's just because it's new. Especially if you've been the person who always shows up, always makes room, always understands, always gives grace, right? When you start honoring yourself, people who benefited from your lack of boundaries, they might feel challenged. I mean, that only makes sense, right? They've benefited off of you not having them. They've benefited off of being able to depend on you for everything, to call you for everything. So now that you place boundaries in place, they like, ugh. Now they all want to talk trash about you, right? They might say you changed, you being distant, you're selfish, right? The first time you tell them no, it's like you ain't never said yes before. But growth always looks like distance to people who don't want to grow with you. Boundaries aren't walls meant to shut people out. Boundaries are filters. They help you to determine who can meet you with respect. And the right people, your people, they will adjust. They might need a little time, okay? Not everybody gonna be on board at first. Because when you set your boundaries and they have to rise to the occasion, that means they gotta go address their shit too, y'all. So they not gonna always jump on board first, but the right people will adjust in time. But most importantly, the right people won't punish you for protecting yourself. So I need you to understand that you don't need permission to set boundaries. You don't need some dramatic incident. You don't need to justify your limits. You are allowed to decide that something no longer works for you at any given moment. Y'all, I'll be in the middle of a conversation sometimes and I catch myself going back and forth. And I will literally stop mid-sentence and be like, oh, you know what? You got it. You right. And like, I'm done. I'm on to the next. Because the moment we're in a conversation and I realize that you were committed to misunderstanding, I just let you misunderstand. Like I no longer want to be the misery to your company. Like that's the point where your boundary connects deeply to your self-love. I love myself enough to not go back and forth with anybody about anything. If it is something that is important to me or passionate to me, I'm just going to move in the manner that I desire to move. And if that means that I'm moving away from you, so be it. Right? Exactly. Listen, they talk trash about Jesus. Like, y'all find a problem with everything. So at the end of the day, I don't care. Right? Because every single boundary says that I value myself enough to protect my peace. Right? It says that I no longer confuse endurance with love. Boundaries are how you stop leaking your energy. They help you show up more present, more regulated, more whole. And so when you protect yourself, you actually have more to give, not less. Because you're no longer pouring from depletion. You're pouring from intention. And that's what makes boundaries an act of love. Not just for yourself, but for others as well. Y'all better be sipping y'all's water too now. Let's see. Trying to think of what else I had on the list to talk about today. Oh, let's talk about strength, y'all. When strength becomes a burden. And I want to talk about this, especially for Black women, right? I want to talk about when strength becomes a burden. Black women, conditioning, choosing self. That's fine. You can make your coffee too. Just sip some water while it brew. What's up, Mr. T? Welcome in, bro. Half the fam is over on YouTube, bro. So they hear, but they not here because TT was glitching earlier. But I do want to, I want to slow down for this part because I think that this part deserves a little bit of a tenderness, especially for Black women, because I think that many of us didn't just learn strength. We were conditioned into it. Strength wasn't presented as an option for Black women. It was a requirement. We learned very early how to hold things together. Oh, thank you so much. Right? We learned very early how to hold it all together, how to show up even when we're tired, how to swallow discomfort and just keep going, how to be dependable, resilient, unbreakable. And while that strength has carried us for generations, thank you, Mr. T, it has also cost us. Right? Somewhere along the way, strength became confused with silence. Right? We have been taught, don't complain. Don't be difficult. Don't make it about you. Just handle it. Push through. And so over the years, we have learned how to override our needs. We learned to stay when we were exhausted. To keep giving even when we were empty. To call it being strong instead of calling it what it really was, which was survival. And here's a truth that I think that we're almost uncomfortable to say out loud. Many Black women were never taught that rest was allowed. We were taught endurance. We were praised for how much we could carry, not for how well we could protect ourselves. So when we start setting boundaries, when we choose peace, or as a Black woman, when we stop explaining, it can feel wrong. Like we're betraying something. And I'm talking about our families, our culture, our identity. But sisters, I want you to understand that it's not betrayal. It's repair. Because strength that costs you your health, your joy, and your softness is not sustainable. And healing that asks, healing asks a different question, right? A different question than survival ever did. See, survival asks you how much you can take, but healing asks you, what do you need? And that shift can feel almost scary, especially when you've, been celebrated for being everything to everyone. And so I think that's something that is important for us as Black women to hear. And and honestly, this goes for everyone. I don't want anyone to feel excluded, but I'm a Black woman. So I just want you to understand that you are not required to suffer to be worthy. You are not obligated to carry what was never yours. You are not selfish for wanting ease. Ease is not laziness. Rest is not weakness. Boundaries are not disrespect. They are your way of saying, I deserve a life where my nervous system can be soft. I deserve relationships that don't require self-erasure. I deserve to experience joy without guilt. Butterfly, elevated awakenings to you. And so when Black women choose peace, it's not just personal, it's generational. Every single time you choose rest over rescue, every time you say no without explaining, every time you walk away from what drains you, you are breaking a cycle. You are teaching your body and the body's watching you that survival is not the only option. No fear, no doubt. Elevated awakenings, bro. Welcome back. You're teaching your body and the body's watching you. Do y'all catch that? Not only are you healing yourself, but you're healing generations. You're teaching them that survival is no longer the only option, right? That softness is allowed, that wholeness is possible, and that choosing yourself is not abandoning anyone. It is actually just you finally coming home to you. So it is time that we start choosing better rooms and building new environments. Because once you begin recognizing misalignment, once you start setting boundaries and give yourself permission to step back from situations, the next question naturally becomes, where do I belong now? Because leaving old rooms can feel a bit disorienting, right? Familiar spaces may no longer fit, but the new ones might not be formed yet. And so that in-between space can feel lonely. But we need to understand that loneliness is not always a sign that you've made the wrong choice. Sometimes God has to remove everybody else away from you to do the work on you. Right? So loneliness is not always a sign that you've made the wrong choice. Cars, elevated awakenings. Sometimes it's simply the sound of transition, right? Choosing better rooms doesn't always mean immediately finding a new group of people. Sometimes it means just choosing peace over noise. Sometimes it means choosing solitude over silence. Sometimes it means just sitting alone with yourself long enough to remember who you are without the influence of others. Because truth is, you can't heal in environments that keep triggering your survival mode. Better rooms are spaces where your nervous system can settle, where you don't have to perform, where you don't have to explain your boundaries, where you don't have to feel like you're too much or not enough. Better rooms feel like being able to speak without being interrupted, to rest without guilt, to experience joy without side eyes, growth without competition. And sometimes the room you need doesn't exist yet. So what do? Baby, you build it, right? We out here cultivating safe spaces. So if I don't have a safe space currently, I'm going to build it. You build it through intentional friendships. You build it through communities that value healing. You build it through spaces that center safety, not just connection. You come on over to the Room to Breathe and you find your people, right? Because again, building new environments takes courage. Because it requires you to trust your discernment. It requires you to say that I'm no longer available for rooms that cost me my peace. And when you start choosing better rooms, I promise you something powerful happens, right? Your standards rise. Your tolerance for chaos lowers. Your body relaxes. You start to feel more like yourself again. Sometimes more like yourself than you've ever felt before. But it's also important to remember that not everyone from your old rooms is meant to follow you into your new ones. Some people were only meant to walk you through survival, not healing. And that doesn't mean that the relationship was a failure. It just meant it was seasonal. You can honor what it was without dragging it into what's becoming. And if you're listening right now and you're thinking, I don't know where my new room is yet, it's okay. You're allowed to be in the hallway. Because the thing that they don't tell you is that hallways are sacred too. They are the places of pause, reflection, and preparation. Sometimes the best room that you can choose is the one where you finally hear yourself again. And when you do start building new environments slowly, intentionally, you notice something shift. You'll start attracting people who match your pace, your values, your energy. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally aligned. And alignment always creates space for the right connections to find you. But it starts with you having the courage to walk away. And I think that walking away is often misunderstood. People imagine it as anger or coldness or giving up. But most of the time, walking away doesn't happen in a moment of rage. It happens after reflection, after exhaustion, after one too many times of choosing understanding over self-respect. So, if you think about it, oftentimes it's quiet. It looks like choosing not to explain yourself anymore. It looks like responding less. It looks like declining invitations that once felt like you once did it because you felt obligated to do so. It looks like allowing distance to grow without filling it with silence. Yeah, I feel a bit dehydrated today, okay? But yeah, that kind of courage doesn't come from hardness. It comes from clarity. Because at some point you realize that staying is costing you more than leaving ever could. So I want you to understand that you can walk away and still care. You can love people and still choose not to be in a relationship with them the same way. Walking away doesn't erase the history. It honors it by refusing to keep repeating what hurts. For many of us, I think that the hardest part isn't actually leaving. It's trusting ourselves enough to believe that we're allowed to. Especially when, we've been taught that endurance equals love, right? But love that requires you to disappear is not love. What's up, coach? Again, love that requires you to disappear is not love. It's obligation. Right? It is obligation. And Watson, respectfully, no thank you. There we go. Yeah, it's obligation. And when you think about it, obligation is heavy. It's super heavy. Courage, on the other hand, feels light, even when it's painful. Because courage says, I choose peace over proving my loyalty. I choose my well-being over being understood. That I choose to honor what my body and spirit are asking for. So, yeah, sometimes courage means accepting that some people will not understand your choice. Right? Coach, yes. So, yeah, they might call you distant. They may say you've changed, or they may not get closure. But clarity does not require a consensus. You are allowed to make decisions that are right for you, even if they're uncomfortable for others. Walking away isn't about cutting people off in bitterness. It's about releasing what no longer aligns. And when you do, something opens. Your breath deepens, your body softens, your mind quiets. You start to feel space where there was once tension and chaos. And that space right there is not emptiness, it is room. Right? Room to heal. Room to grow. Room to breathe. So if you are standing at the edge of a decision right now, if something in you knows that it is time to step back, elevated awakening, Shonda, I just want to remind you gently that you are not weak for walking away. You are wise. And wisdom is soft and steady and sure. Excuse me. So yeah, as we start to wrap things up, let's just bring this all home, right? I want to bring it back to where we all started. For those of you who maybe missed out at the beginning and you're going to go to YouTube and watch the replay, let me just tell you that our topic today was bad company corrupts good character. Not as a warning meant to scare you, not as a command meant to shame you, but as an invitation, right? An invitation to reflect, not on who's bad, right? But on what's been shaping you. Because character isn't only revealed in how we show up for others, it's also revealed in how consistently we show up for ourselves. So before you move on with your day, I want you to take one more intentional pause and just breathe with me. I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. Inhale. Exhale. Again, inhale. And exhale. And I want you to ask yourself, honestly and without judgment, what environments have you been allowing to influence you lately? What conversations leave you feeling smaller instead of supported? Where have you been compromising your peace to preserve proximity? And remember, there's no rush to answer. It's not about making a drastic move or cutting people off overnight. I mean, you may, but that's not solely what it's about. It's about awareness. Because corruption, again, doesn't always come from chaos. Sometimes it comes from comfort that no longer fits, from things that once felt familiar and now they quietly ask you, to betray yourself. Self-love begins the moment that you decide, I will no longer allow my healing to be undone by my environment. Today we are choosing better company, better rooms. It's not about, superiority. It's about stewardship. Stewardship of your energy, your spirit, your nervous system, your character. Because again, truth is, good character deserves an environment that protects it. So if today's episode stirred something in you, I want you to honor that. Sit with it. Journal about it. Pray on it. Breathe through it. And remember, you don't owe anyone immediate answers, but you do owe yourself honesty. Remember that walking away from what drains you is not rejection, right? That's reverence. It's you honoring the good character that you've worked so hard to build. So move forward gently. Choose spaces that nourish you. Choose people who respect your growth. Choose environments that help you to stay whole. Because your life, right? You deserve a life that allows you to remain who you truly are. And in that life, you deserve company that allows you to remain who you truly are. Now, before we part ways, let me leave you all with a little love and light. As always, I encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. This has been another Room to Breathe podcast, and I cannot wait to connect with you all again soon. Thank you.
Me, I